Iran's indigenous fighter plane could match America's F-18. How capable was the CK? Following the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the overthrow of the Western-aligned Pahlavi dynasty and Tehran's foreign policy realignment away from the Western Bloc, Iran was no longer able to acquire either US-made weapons systems or parts to service existing weapons platforms. For the Iranian Air Force, which relied exclusively on US-made fighters including the third-generation F-5E Tiger II light fighter, the heavier F-4 Phantom, and elite fourth-generation F-14 heavyweight jets, this was a particularly serious situation. Western analysts widely predicted that a lack of parts would ground the entire Iranian fleet permanently within 5 years. The newly declared Islamic Republic, facing a large-scale invasion from neighboring Iraq just months after its formation, was forced to invest heavily in its military aviation to protect its airspace from hostile aircraft and avoid losing air superiority entirely. These investments proved successful, and Iran's American-made fighters were able to fly throughout the war and continued to form the backbone of its fleet until to this day. This provided the country with an invaluable stepping stone from which to further strengthen its military aviation industries after the war, servicing even fighters as complex and sophisticated as the F-14 as well as producing advanced indigenous weapons systems for these aircraft such as the Faker-90 air-to-air missile. More recently, amid growing tensions with the Western Bloc and difficulty importing modern combat aircraft due to both political and economic constraints, Iran has invested in developing fighter jets indigenously to serve its needs. While the Iranian Kh-313 light stealth fighter announced in 2013 grabbed headlines, and was long been derided by Western analysts as a propaganda stunt unable to produce any combat-capable aircraft, the result of the program remains to be seen. Given revelations of Iran's recent success producing and fielding highly sophisticated stealth drones, however, and the relatively advanced state of its military aviation, the possibility of the Kh-313 entering serial production and combat service later in the decade should not be entirely discounted. Long before the Kh's announcement, however, Iran had already developed another potentially promising indigenous fighter under a joint sponsorship from the Defense Ministry and the Air Force. This was the CK twin-engine light fighter, which saw its first flight in 2004 and reportedly entered service in 2007. Of the 3 US fighter classes in service in the Iranian Air Force, the F-5E is by far the lightest and least complex. The fighter was developed as a low-cost platform to be exported by the United States to its lower-tier allies such as South Vietnam and Thailand, while only close US partners such as Israel and Japan were permitted to purchase the heavier F-4 Phantom. Iran acquired the F-5 long before it was permitted to acquire the Phantom, and only extensive lobbying on the part of the head of state Mohammad Reza Shah himself led to Iran being sold the F-4 and later the F-14. The F-5 single-quote simplicity, however, made it far easier not only to develop parts for and maintain, but also for Iranian experts to attempt to reverse engineer. Was the K fighter's close resemblance to the F-5 as a result of the former being closely based on the design of the latter? And although the F-5 single-quote design dates back to the early 1960s, the Iranian Air Force has invested in upgrading the design both to keep its existing US-made fighters serviceable and to develop viable modern combat platforms based on the F-5 airframe.